Welcome back to the Modern Hippie Podcast. I am joined today by Matt Gallo, who is a force of nature, who leads people through transformative adventures, coaches them to the next level, is a father and husband, and my friend. So, welcome so much to the show today.
Oh, hearing that, it feels good. Thank you, Barrett. And so good to be here. So awesome. I'm so excited for this. Been ever since we got it scheduled, I've been like looking at it on my calendar, like, yes, I get to talk to Barrett again.
Yeah.
Talk
Did you
about
manifest
mushrooms and
anything?
adventures. I just
I love. Yeah, you and I met back in July. I mean, we sort
yeah.
of met online before that. We're both in a program together, but we met in July, and one of my opening lines for the program was busting out my microdose pills and being like, "Who wants one?" Because we're in a full day immersion.
Yeah, and I took two of them, which and then the heat. Did you notice the heat was just turned up in that room?
I
Like
don't
the
know why he
actual
did that
heat.
to us.
Was that
Yeah,
on I didn't know if it was that or the microdose or both, but I was on another planet for a little bit, just
for whatever reason,
having the experience.
the air conditioning was off,
It
I
was
think.
right.
And because it was 105 degrees outside, by the time we had spent 6 hours there, it was over 90 degrees inside Jesse's home.
I think it's part of the whole cult building process, to be honest.
Ethical
Um,
cult.
yeah, well, when people go through like really ridiculous experiences together and no one asks questions, it's the same as an initiation. It's hilarious. I'm gonna ask him
Yeah,
about that. It's gonna be on
we
our next
should.
call. Yeah.
Because I had asked him the day before, what temperature he kept his home because I'm cold everywhere. Like, it's 105 outside, but everyone in Austin has their air
yeah.
conditioning set to like 68, 69, 70. And so I was like, are you reasonable? Is it going to be like 75 in your home? Should I wear pants? Could I wear shorts? I always
Mm.
bring a sweater everywhere anyways. But he was like, my home is usually like in the mid 70s. And I was like, okay, great. You're reasonable. And then I was like, I
Reasonable.
think he just left it
Yeah.
off for me.
I don't know. I don't know. It was quite an experience being in Texas that during that time, and they had a heat wave. It was like 100 degrees plus every day for like 2 months or something.
It's still,
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm still contemplating moving there. I'm
Are
going
you?
back in,
You're going when, next month or
yeah, I'm going
October?
October 1st for a month and a half.
Okay.
So it should be a little more temperate, but really interested in seeing, I'm going to get my own place out there
Yeah.
and see what it's like to just be and meet my
Hmm.
own friends and see who's actually, everyone's always like, yeah, let's hang out, but like who's really down to hang out when you're actually there.
Yeah. And you're in, where are you in, where are you at now? Southern California?
I'm in Huntington Beach. Yeah.
Huntington
Where are you?
Beach, New York City. Polar
And you're
opposite. Like,
yeah, and you're getting ready to move.
yeah, we're going to Bend, Oregon. It's
Cool.
the destination. We're actually going to be there. We're going there in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from the day of this recording. I don't know when you release this, but we're going to be there mid-September. We rented a camper van to drive
Mm.
around the Pacific Northwest, and which is going to be interesting with a toddler. I'm like so excited to see what that's like. But I've had this vision, Barrett, since like before my son was born, actually.
Mm.
I'd get into meditation or even just like thinking or dreaming. This vision, it comes to mind, and it's my son walking on the beach in Oregon. And Oregon like has these really cool beaches with like these big rocks, and it's like really nice sand. I just have this vision of him walking on the beach. I don't know why I've had that for so long. And
Mm.
and that's going to happen. Like we're going to be we're going to be there for 2 weeks straight, just driving around, and we get to camp out on the beach and wake up to the ocean waves. And of course I'm going to go surfing. Like
Of course.
I already booked I booked a half day like private surfing lesson out there, because then you get the wetsuit and everything included, and I'm just like stoked
Hmm.
for it.
Yeah, and you get a
Yeah,
buddy in the water.
exactly. Like I don't want to go myself. My wife's not into it. We got to watch the baby. So yeah,
Mm.
so excited for that and all of the other adventures.
Well, you are the adventure guy, is what I've been picking up on since I've gotten to know you. Is
Yeah,
part of your MO is taking people on these transformational adventures. What do you have one
yeah,
coming up, or did you have one recently?
yeah. Well, the next one coming up is going to be in October. We're going out to Colorado for 5 days, and yeah, it's been something that's always been a part of my life. Adventure, getting into the wilderness. You ever go somewhere, Barrett, where you just feel, I don't want to use the word better because it's so vague, but you feel you, like more you.
Fuck yeah.
There's, yeah, like imagine you feel that in the ocean or in the water with given your background. But for me, it's always been the mountains. And,
Mm,
and so I had this idea years ago to start a travel company, an adventure travel company.
cool.
And I think really big. So immediately my mind went to like how this is going to be $1 billion company one day. And it can be. It certainly can be. But then I thought more personally, I was like, well, what do I want to create? What do I want to experience? What what role do I want to play? And the whole premise is around this. It's like I really loved growing up, like going on these little trips, these short adventures, these short little spontaneous trips, and getting to experience places and see it in a way that most people don't get to see. Like experience parts
Mhm.
of the world, parts of the country, parts of the parts of travel that most people don't get to experience. And then fortunately I met another human who's we're now married. we who like shares this love of spontaneity and adventure. And so for so long we've been taking these trips out to middle of nowhere places and just seeing what happens. Like we don't really go with a plan, or or we have like one thing in mind that we really want to do, and everything else just sort of works itself out. And there's such power in that sort of experience from a just like an like going into the unknown perspective. And so I wanted to create something, an opportunity to facilitate that for other people. And and what it turned into was, this adventure that I started doing, or these guided adventures, these guided experiences that I started doing about 2 years ago, where I give people just enough information and they pay for it. They enroll in this program, and I get them all worked up and prepared for it mentally. I tell them what to bring. I tell them where to fly into. I pick them up at the airport, and everything else is mostly unknown.
Cool.
It typically involves something that really pushes you to your edge. Now, I wouldn't get anyone into a position where they're going to get hurt or seriously hurt. Like maybe they'll fall or something, but not seriously hurt, and definitely not near death. But like we're going to go to your edge. And what that typically shows up with, I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with Colorado, but there's these mountains called 14ers. It's like any mountain over 14,000 feet. There's 50 something of them.
Oh, wow.
When you go and climb these mountains, especially coming from a place like Huntington Beach or New York, like you're at sea level, and then you go to 14,000 feet, and it's like a vacuum,
Mm-hmm.
And it takes hours. If like some of them takes days, but you know, I pick some that we could do in one full day, and then we integrate the experience. Right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like that will push you to your physical limit. And oftentimes, when people get to that space, when you get to your physical edge, something else magical happens. And
Yeah.
I imagine it's the same thing, Barrett, that'll happen for you, that happened for you when you were a professional athlete, when you're competing. Like something happens, this primitive version of you comes out, which is like most close to your truest, realest self.
Mm.
That part of you that you've just been letting stay in the background, letting hide behind the masks, behind the work, behind the business, behind the family that you created, behind the routines of normal life that's been just like buried, it comes out. And it's a really good opportunity to do some deep emotional healing too.
Mm-hmm.
Because typically what comes out is a shadow, like an aspect of yourself you were just so afraid to confront, your real self, your excuses, your justifications, your stories. So we pull them out of people in these super intense experiences. And then you get to the top of a mountain, by the way, and it's like winning a gold medal. It's like, oh my God, this was the most amazing experience ever. I want more. It's addicting.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how, you know, we talk about in our space, like retreats. People go on retreats all the time, especially in plant medicine. They have the experience, and you can go and do stuff like this, but then you go home and you go back to normal life. And if there's no way to integrate the experience into that, in my opinion, it's not really, it wasn't really that valuable. What in my opinion, it's not that valuable. What it ends up creating is like FOMO, like you're just missing that, and you spend all your time thinking about those experiences that you once had, and you want that back, and you end up like having this dichotomy, this what's the word, cognitive dissonance. And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought, well, could we do this? Could we have these radical, transformative, emotionally charged, fun, adventurous experiences, and then go home and be a better human, be a better father, be a better business owner, be a better leader, and not just like appreciate the experience, but like take that energy that you had, and that you created, and carry it with you throughout whatever you're doing, which shows up in how you make decisions, which shows up in like the personality of the person you are. Um, so that's like what these are all about. And let me tell you, I get to have the most fun. That's what it's so selfish. It's like, let's go do cool stuff. I'm gonna watch you guys go through some shit. I'm over here just enjoying
Mm-hmm.
life.
And they get to have that beautiful example in you too, I'm sure, of someone who lives this adventure, loves this adventure, and has channeled this adventure into making fantastic decisions in life away from the quote unquote adventure, but like really bringing that through to pushing your comfort zone in
Mhm.
everything that you do. Because once I'm sure you've climbed that 14,000-foot hike for a day, I'm sure that can feel to most people like the hardest thing they've ever done in their entire life. And then that kind
Yeah,
of makes everything else that you thought was hard a little bit easier.
certainly does. You know what else is interesting, which I would actually love to get your insight on or thoughts on, maybe even your experience. There's this common thing that happens when people go to do these types of experiences, more so with very big undertakings. Like, I have friends that have climbed Mount Everest, right? It's like the tallest mountain in the
Whoa.
world. It takes years of dedication and training. There's a lot of investment too, financially, time. Like you pour so much into going to do this thing, and then you go there and you're in Nepal for 2 months
Mm,
at least. There's such a big investment of time. We talked about like initiations and cults before. It's like the same thing. Then you come back, then you come home, and there's this thing called post expedition depression,
mm,
which is a phenomenon that you could imagine occurs. I see it when people come back from deployments in the military. I see it with professional athletes who then are no longer professional athletes,
mhm,
where it's so hard to relate to other human beings. That's one aspect of it. It's like no one understands. Like it's just impossible to explain what you just experienced. And then also, this thing you're working toward, you accomplished it, and now it's over.
yeah,
And this happens in business too. Like people have business goals, they hit their targets, and they're like, now what? No, there's like no one else here at the top of the mountain. It's
right.
a very lonely place to be. Um, so like a really important sort of mission and undertaking that I have is to help people like work through that, to not experience that on these experiences, which is doubtful because it's so small. But we're dealing with very ambitious, very driven human beings who
Mhm,
are likely in a category of one, especially in their circle, their family, right? It's important to have community, and it's important to have other people who can relate to you and be able to
mhm.
like hear you out and also like call you out once in a while, right?
Yeah,
I'm curious if you have any like insight on that, being a former athlete.
definitely from the athlete perspective, as well as something I'm very familiar with that feeling of it's a post-travel depression as well,
Yeah.
especially when someone's saved up and gone on a big trip that they've planned for 6 months, 3 months, maybe even a year. I've personally had a lot of those where I've gone to Peru, where I went to Peru for a month and a half for the first time last year, and
Mm,
it completely changed my life. And, um, I think the athlete thing is very relatable. There's a lot of athletes out there. And for me now, what I'm going through is that same level of intensity, but in my spiritual growth and in my growth with using different plant medicines and psychedelics. And so now I find myself again often very isolated
mm,
without having people in my physical circle every day who can relate to the depths at which I go, who can relate to the transformative experience of ceremony, of ceremony after ceremony after ceremony, who can relate to the need for the integration process, who can even relate to the idea that, like, one ceremony is transformational and why you would continue to do more in a short period. And then let
mm.
alone that I work with the medicine. And so what that means then with how much more I'm doing the medicine than most people ever will.
Yeah.
So I'm personally like really going through that, but
Hmm.
I see it in athletes all the time too. I used to date this BMXer who at the time was like number one in the world. All he did was win. He was very unbeatable at BMX Park back in like 2008, I think that was.
Hmm.
And Daniel felt very alone all the time. And
Yeah.
and if he was on his game, no one could touch him. And so the people he would train with, it was like people just pretended to be his friend sometimes. And there were very few people he could learn from. And
Mm.
I think there's a lot of athletes who can relate to that when you're breaking world records, when you're inventing new tricks, when you're going farther than anyone else has gone. Who do you take with you on that journey? And then because you've learned
Hmm.
so much, how do you find community of others who can also push the boundaries the way that you have? For me, it got instilled in me as something I call the fear override switch.
Hmm.
And I was just talking to Alex about this today, where when it comes to physicality and sports, like, man, do I have that fear override switch on lock. When
Yeah.
it comes to doing things I don't want to do, like writing my newsletter or coming up with a new Instagram post, I'm like, uh-oh, I have a much harder time overriding what there must
Yeah.
be some underlying fear in how that message will be received.
Yeah. This is actually something we work on in our experiences, these adventures. I have these. There's these three. We can call them levels or layers to leadership that we work through on these. And the first one is your identity. And the
Mm,
very first layer of how you lead, meaning how you show up for yourself and for others, is your identity and your understanding of what that is or might be, which is such a weird thing. It's not something most people think about. In fact, um, I I tend to start with the question, well, who am I? So that talks a lot about identity, which, if you think about
mhm,
it, humans, especially, like, yeah, well, humans in general, we are such a weird species, and we're probably the only species that gets to ask that question.
mhm. Right.
And so, what a privilege, what a privilege it is to question who you are. And even then, like, only some will ever do it. Like, only some humans will ever take the opportunity to question that. Like, most people living outside the modern world, which at this point, there's so much modernization, but traditional societies don't really question that stuff because they're so ingrained in their culture, their community. It doesn't matter. They don't really care. They just
Hmm.
know. They know who they are. And it's part of their rite of passage at some point, I imagine. That we get to do it. And a big aspect of your identity, Barrett, is your fears. We tend to associate with our fears. And we make so many
Mm,
powerful decisions based on the things we're afraid of or based on the things we're not afraid of. And I discovered this because I'm really interested in how the mind works. Always enjoyed that. Been interested in how people learn. I've always noticed that there's things I'm not afraid of, and there's things that I just ignore because or avoid because, like, there's probably some fear. But I started to question, well, what is fear? So it's such an interesting thing. And I realized, just doing some, like, self auditing and, like, looking back in time, I realized the things that I was always afraid of or afraid of taking action on, the things I was afraid of stepping into, were straight up. They were just things I've never done before,
mm,
or things I was not good at.
yeah.
And okay, we could keep going with this. What are we not good at? Things we don't do often enough to get
Hmm.
better at.
Totally.
Or here's another way of spinning it, because everything stems from, like, a very brief period of time in our childhood. At one point, we were told to be afraid of something.
Mm,
Or at one point, we were told, you're so good at that. And so we kept doing it and we thought we were invincible. Same thing for something we were bad at. Like, you're not good at this. And we believed it.
mhm.
Talk about, like, talking to our the child inside of us. We can
Absolutely.
rewrite these things too. We can override, like you said, override the fear simply by asking these questions. Like, am I afraid of it, or was I once told to be afraid of it, or am I just not good at it? Do I need to practice more? You dive into this and you realize that your identity is more like water than rock. It's fluid. It can change. I think that's pretty
Mm,
cool. I think
that
that's
is.
cool.
I have a recent example of that.
Do you?
Like, um, I wasn't always a surfer. I grew up at the ocean. And
Yeah.
then right around the time I got into wakeboarding, I decided I hated sand, I hated salt water, and I was terrified of sharks. And so I was like, fuck the beach. I have no business being there. I like the distaste I had for sand, you wouldn't even believe. And after I moved to California like 13 years ago, I was like, oh, I should get into surfing because it's so accessible. And I never did, and I never did. And like 10 years went by, and I was finally like, it's so hard to wakeboard here. I should really get into surfing. And I was like, I am so scared of sharks. So I started swimming with sharks to get away from
Ooh,
that fear.
there
Swimming
you
with sharks
go.
without a cage, like face my biggest fear. And that's a whole nother diatribe. But I also like wasn't good at surfing, and I thought I would be great at it right out the gates because standing on a board in water, like what could there really be
Yeah.
to it? Until I
It's a little
discovered that,
different.
yeah, 90% of surfing involves paddling out and more paddling and reading the waves and more paddling, getting yourself in the right spot and paddling and popping up. And very, very little of surfing is standing on the board. Like
Is
there's a
actual
whole,
surfing.
the whole learning curve of like beginner to intermediate is not
Yeah.
about standing on the board. And man, I would get so scared. And I would show up on 5 to 6 foot days with a soft top. And I would just go, well, let's see if I can paddle out. Like I didn't even know any better. I just learned to
Yeah.
surf in 5 to 6 foot waves predominantly. And
Nice.
it eventually became my identity, and as I got better at it, and I would force myself to go because I was like, I'm just not good at it. Right. And the more less that you're good at it, the less you want to go.
Yeah.
But it really changed so many things for me by forcing myself to go. And at 30, what was that, 34 years old, starting to
Hmm.
do something new that I sucked at after having been professional at a sport that so many thought is similar.
Ooh.
Those boundaries really started to move and it was so fucking humbling. I didn't even like surfing for the first 3 months I was out there doing it. Um, and I would go like every day. I'd be like, I'm
Mm,
just here to paddle. I'm just here to paddle.
yeah. What was the what was your motivation to keep going? Was it because you really wanted to learn? Like you just had this burning desire to like be good at it? Or was it something
Yeah.
else? I'm curious.
I guess in
Yeah.
the short of it, yeah, it was that pro athlete mentality of knowing
Gotcha.
that I wasn't going to get better at something that I didn't actually try. Like
Right.
and seeing how hard it was when I would go like once a week. I mean, you might as well not be going once a week. Like in terms of improving, you might as well not be going. And so I knew from an athlete's perspective that I needed to be there 4 days a week at minimum to
Mm,
maintain and or grow any kind of muscle capacity that would help me in the sport. And so I just said, I want to be good at this. I
yeah.
want to drop in on waves and have people take pictures of me where I feel like I live. It's kind of an egoic thing now that I reflect back on it. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I'm like, this is the last egoic thing I have left. It's a pretty healthy habit.
You know, the ego is so cool. It's so useful. It gets us to do
Yeah,
things that are way out of our comfort zone. Who cares what it's for?
totally.
Like, who cares what the motivation is? As long as
Hmm.
you don't hurt anyone,
Yeah.
right?
And there's so
As
many
long as it's not hurting.
varying degrees of where that fear continues to come up in surfing as the waves
Mm.
get bigger. Like one day
Yeah.
I was paddling out and got sucked into the pier with a friend of mine who was like, no, that won't happen to us. And we got sucked in the pier and I was on a board. I couldn't duck dive. And for the only time my friend has ever seen it that way, the waves were breaking through the pier. So I start bouncing off of
Whoa.
pilings. It was terrifying. And then we get out and it's like a
Hmm.
6 to 8 foot day. And I'm like shaking at that point. Just how am I supposed to even get in from here? I was too scared to drop in on a wave. And I actually got some. some like sports counseling after that. One of
Ooh,
my
interesting.
friends had some work in that, and I was like, I came home, I was throwing all my stuff around. I was angry. I was so angry at myself for not being able to push my limits that day. And yeah, anger is
That's
an
your ego
interesting,
showing up. Yeah.
it's an
Yeah.
interesting emotion to be angry at the sport, right?
Hmm.
And
Anger at the sport or like at yourself? Like, which one is it? It could be like anger at your circumstances. Like that day, everything just goes wrong and you feel like the world is now suddenly working against you. Like that could cause some anger.
mm, I think I was mad at myself. I was like, I can't
Yeah.
believe I made it out there through the pilings and then I was too big of a pussy to drop in on anything. I was too fucking scared. And
Yeah.
what the fuck? What am I doing surfing if I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be too fucking scared?
You
Can't
know,
be a pussy.
here's another take on fear because it exists in so many different ways, and I love it because when you actually feel real fear, and I mean
Mm,
like not the fear of not being good enough, like that kind of thing, but like or the fear of being seen, like those are pretty irrational fears. Rational fears are like fear of death, fear of being
mhm,
mauled by a bear, right? Things like that. So I'm into rock climbing too. Like rock climbing is fun. And I love it. And it scares the shit out of me. And I've been doing it for 20 years. And
Oh, and it still scares the shit out of you.
here's like the part that really scares me. Like so when you're climbing, right, you're typically climbing up, right? Eventually you have to go down, right?
Mhm,
Which means so many different things. Depending on the type of climbing you're doing, you either build an anchor, meaning you tie something up at the top so that you're anchored to it and you could descend on a rope, or you're like just straight up attached to the wall face with these little things that are plugged into the wall, um, called protection. And when you get to the top, you like tag the top, you're like, oh, I could breathe, I'm done. And then you got to go back down. And I have this fear every single time, this like, oh shit feeling, like shooting burningness up to my throat kind of tension that I feel when I remember that I placed that piece of protection on the wall. I built that anchor. That means I have to
mm,
trust my skills now, even though I've done it hundreds of times. What if something goes wrong? And then
mm.
you legitimately face that fear immediately. It's akin to skydiving. Like you just let go. And in for a brief moment, like I talk to God for a second. I'm like, just take the wheel. uh, I got a kid. He's watching. My son is watching. Don't let me die. And then,
Mm,
like in a matter of moments, like not even moments, milliseconds, you realize that the gear has you. Like the anchor is safe, and you're descending, and you're like, oh, this is nice. Similar to like if you've ever been skydiving, that one moment right before you jump is really
mm,
scary. But once you take the leap, it's no longer scary. Now you're in the moment. Now you're using the fear, which is like it comes from the same, I believe, the same like neural pathway or chemical thing as excitement. It's adrenaline. It's a useful
mhm,
thing. Um, it's funny in our little call today that we had earlier when we were being asked about things we're excited about, things that are coming up, um, times we get out of our comfort zone, tap into like the input, as he called it. This thought came to mind is like those moments that you're afraid are those moments that trigger so much gratitude and appreciation and inspiration.
mm,
Like you just like I could write a book every time I go climbing because of the like the inspiration that comes from it. So fear is cool. Fear is useful. Um, it's not something to be afraid of, though. It's like something you can keep in mind and utilize.
I love that moment you're describing of going from fear, almost identifying whether it's rational or irrational fear, and then switching into surrender and
Mm-hmm.
confidence. It's
Yeah.
like the only way to really surrender is through confidence of knowing that whatever's going to happen is meant to be. As you described that, it reminded me, I used to
Mm.
be terrified of airplanes, and I flew a ton as a wakeboarder. And so there was just finally one day where I was like, look, this fear is irrational. And every time I get on a plane, I just need to surrender to the idea it's either my time to die or it's not. And chances are, most likely, it is not my time to die. And so
Yeah.
I can just surrender to that. And instead of wasting all of this time being anxious on the plane,
Mm-hmm.
just know, like, got this.
Yeah. And there's a really practical way to like make this work for yourself. Like I was describing the feeling when you're about to let go from the rock and you're gonna like you might die, you might not. The phrase that I said was, well, what if I fall?
Mm,
And our the language is a like a gateway to our subconscious mind. Right? Our
totally.
words are what influence our thoughts. Our words come from our thought are our thoughts. They're the same thing. Our words influence our behavior. And so when we feel something, the first thing that happens is we have a thought. First, we get a feeling. For me, it was tightening in my chest and my throat. And then the words came to mind. What if I fall?
Mm,
That was the response to the trigger, which was the feeling. And then there's the behavior. The behavior in that case, when you're afraid of something, it's usually fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, or relax and surrender, like you said. And it's so interesting because like words have so much power, and you can like every time I'm in a moment like that, which happens all the time. Like I ski big mountains, like I'm about to go down a big mountain, like what if there's an avalanche? Oh, well, what if this is easy? Or what if this is like the best run of
mhm,
my life? What if I did everything correctly? What if my
mhm,
gear is like does its job? What if I'm supposed to die?
mm,
All of this, we just what if, like literally change the language, say it out loud sometimes, and it will trigger a different response because it works in like the opposite way too. We change the words, we get a different emotional reaction, and we can go
mhm.
from breathing stuck in our chest and like um, our butthole all puckered up to hmm. Same thing when you just take a heroic dose of mushrooms and you're like, I wonder what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah, I like that you bring up the words and
Yeah.
our mindset, the words being powerful. That was the solution to me feeling like a pussy that day,
Mm.
was my friend who kind of coached me down into it. He said, it sounds like you need an affirmation. And
Yeah.
the affirmation we came up with was, it's just water. And now the ocean is a big place and waves can be very dangerous, but at the end of the day, I'm a water child. I am so comfortable swimming under an 8 foot wave. Like it's not a big deal at all. And so I ended up writing on all my surfboards in
Mm.
I think it's like oil pen. It's just water at the nose.
Nice.
So every time I go to paddle in on something, I just look down and I remember it's just water. And that
Hmm.
sort of has really subsided my fear of those big waves.
Barrett, there's not much to do in terms of water sports in Texas.
Are you worried for me?
I don't know. I'm just thinking about it. Thinking about it.
There's a lot of
You could
wakeboarding in
you could do
Texas
some wake yeah, you could do some wakeboarding. That's true. That's true.
and wake
Yeah.
surfing. Yeah.
I haven't
Actually,
done
there's a
that yet. That
huge,
looks like fun.
oh, it is. There's a huge wakeboard
Yeah.
scene in Austin, wake surf scene. They have a couple cable parks. I've been on a boat a couple times out there. Know a lot of people with boats. I'm sure I'll meet more. Luckily,
Yeah.
it's a pretty easy calling card when I'm like, "Hey, I was a pro wakeboarder. Do you want more girls on your boat?" And then people are like, "Yes and yes."
Both. They want to learn from you
Yes.
and they want more girls on their boat.
Yeah.
That's great.
You haven't done any wakeboarding?
I've done wakeboarding um, a handful of times, not wake surfing. I just really
Mm,
recently learned about what that is, seeing like Instagram videos, and I'm like, that's
yeah.
cool. It looks um, similar to surfing. I mean, you got to just catch the right position on the wave and keep your balance, and it's all good. But I've done
Yep.
wakeboarding. I actually, in high school, I worked at a summer camp as a lifeguard, and we also had boating. I was into sailing, like really big into sailing, like these small boats, and I would race these little boats. But we also had a motorboat and water skis and wakeboarding, and so for a couple of summers, I was doing it, a couple of times a week, and it was so much fun. It was just so much
Yeah.
fun. I love the feeling of speed, like
Mm,
it's like speed, and then nature is awesome. That's why I think it's why I like skiing so much, because you can just like you're just cruising and you're like sort of one with nature. Like it's you and the snow or you and the water. It's cool. I like that kind
yeah.
of stuff.
What's been your top speed skiing?
Oh, um, I'm gonna guess 45 to 47 miles an hour. I used to track it when I used to be so obsessed with metrics, and so I would, I'd wear a watch and I'd track all of it, and then I lost my nice expensive Garmin watch, and I was
Mm,
like, this is a sign to just get over the tracking, and so
yes.
now I just ski.
I
But yeah,
love
like
it.
probably 45, 47 miles an hour, which I don't know if that's fast. It definitely felt fast. Um, Talk about fear. Like you going that
Mm.
fast, barreling down a mountain, and there's trees and there's rocks and there's other people who I don't know how good they are at stopping, but I'm not that good at stopping. I'm good at skiing.
Oh no.
So that's one of those moments where it's like, all right, what happens, happens. I'm here. But yeah.
That was something that made me a really confident snowboarder was getting really good at stopping. Like I can go from 40 miles an hour to stopped pretty
Oh
quickly.
boy. Yeah. Yeah,
You
I'm joking about that. I could stop. I've gotten good at that. I remember one time when I was just learning how to ski. Me and my wife were skiing together, and we were both learning together. And we had the whole mountain like to ourselves, like this one trail, pretty wide, like blue trail, nice and easy. And we're crisscrossing each other. And I'm holding a GoPro because I'm like, this is cool. And instead of looking at ahead, I'm looking at the GoPro. And
oh,
all of a sudden, we just smash into each other, just collide. And it's all on video. Like we tumble, all our skis just fly away, and we're rolling down the mountain. And it was hilarious. And we only got a little bruised up and hurt. But it was like, it was just so funny because like she saw me, she could have stopped, but she couldn't. And because we were just learning, like I legit could not stop myself. It was just no matter what I wanted to do, I didn't have the physical capacity to make it
mm,
happen. And so funny. So funny. Yeah.
gosh, I love all those mountain stories. I
Yeah.
spent quite a few winters getting quite a few days in here in Mammoth in California.
Oh.
And
This year was wild. Did you get out there this year?
No, I bought a pass against my will, knowing that I was not interested in going much this year,
Oh,
or that, it takes like going 6 or 7 times to really pay for the pass. And I was like, I feel like I would only go
yeah.
6 or 7 times. I literally went 0 times this year,
Wow.
and I bought the pass. So
How far
okay,
are you from Mammoth? That's not very close.
about 5 hours,
Five
five and a half
hours. Yeah.
hours.
Not bad.
So
Yeah.
it's a beautiful drive. It's my favorite drive.
Yeah.
But I just really made the switch to like usually when it snows, the surf is also great. And so
Mm.
now I'm having to decide between POW and 6 foot waves.
Yeah.
And like my heart is just now more in the surf.
I got you.
And I think I've spent like 50 days in a season up at Mammoth before.
Whoa.
And the season
Nice.
before they had that blizzard of the century. I think up until this past year, it was the blizzard of the century or the
Yeah.
blizzard of the decade, where over the course of
Mm-hmm.
3 days, they got like 15 feet of snow. And I
Mm-hmm.
had planned for a month to be
Wow.
there, those like 4 days when it was supposed to be just like 2 to 3 feet of snow. And then as I got there, I got so lucky that I met someone. I went by myself and I stayed in a friend's apartment that he usually rents out, but the apartment kept getting snowed in. And
Mm.
so I couldn't get my car out to go to the mountain anymore. And he wasn't paying attention to the weather. And he was like, I need you out so that someone can come clean because someone else is coming in on like the day after. And it was during
Mm.
COVID. So he's like, you know, there has to
Yeah.
be 48 hours of no one being in there before someone can come in. And I was like, dude, are you not
Cool.
watching the weather? Like I literally may not be able to leave your apartment. Um, so I
That's
had met
crazy.
someone, yeah, on the chairlift that the first day I was up there before it started snowing 5 feet a day. I met someone who actually lived back in LA, like a mile from me, and he used to be a photographer for Burton. And so we were just like, oh, like super buddy buddy. And luckily, he was staying in a house. He had a truck, and his wife was there, and they had an extra room in their Airbnb. And
Nice.
he kept checking in with me, being like, "Hey, are you okay? Like all the snow coming down, are you okay?" And I was like, finally, I was like, "I'm actually not okay. Like my friend is insisting that I be out. I'm not. I don't. I'm gonna have to leave my car in the garage. Like I can't get it out. I tried to drive through the roads to go snowboard one day and almost got stuck and had to turn around." And people are being rescued by snowmobiles and things, and I was like, he insists that I be out. I have nowhere to go, and he was like, I'll come get you. You can come stay with us. He got in two
Nice.
car accidents on the way to come get me.
Holy shit.
It was that bad.
Talk about
So,
surrendering though, because you finally like letting go and giving in and saying, I need help. That's cool.
yeah, and I gave up. And my ex-boyfriend lived there too, and he kept being like, "Want me to come rescue you on the snowmobile?" I was like, "Anyone but you."
Anyone but
I
you.
love you, Joe. Sorry. I love you. At the time,
Oh
I
my
was just like, not
God. Yeah.
really. But I appreciated the offer. So, Joe,
Yeah.
if you're listening, thanks. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, it was so funny because literally 2 hours after I got out, my friend, who was a firefighter, whose place I was staying in, also, I love him, he went, "Holy shit, I wasn't really reading your messages. Yeah, I wasn't really paying attention to what you were saying. And now I realize how bad it is. Like, of course, you don't have to leave my place. Like, I don't even, the roads, the highways, everything was closed. I was like, these people aren't even coming in 2 days. Like, the highway's shut. Like, no one's coming, no
Yeah.
one's
No
going.
one's coming. No one's
Yeah. And
coming.
so by the time he was like,
Wow.
no, oh my God, your safety, please, please don't leave. Please stay as long as you need to. Fuck their money, fuck their cancellation.
Oh
I
man.
was like, I'm out. My car's
Mm.
in the garage, but I'm out. But
On a lighter note,
surrender.
like the main reason we're moving, my family's moving to Bend, Oregon, is because like 15 minutes away is Mount Bachelor, which is this awesome place.
Oh
I have
yeah.
friends that live there, and I just want to ski every single day.
Mm.
uh, and like, well, that, and the community there, I have a ton of friends, and just like get my son around that environment. And but to be able to like wake up and drive to the mountain and get a couple of runs in, and then take some calls and do some work and then get some more runs in, like I want to do that every day. That sounds like fun. So big
Yeah,
reason why. And feel free to come up for a weekend or a month or something and join us. Come show us your skills.
deal. I would love that. Especially if I end up moving to Austin, there's no driving to a mountain whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah. It's just hop on a plane. It is easy. I like Austin
Yeah.
because it's like it's pretty much in the middle of the country. You could get anywhere in 4 hours,
Mhm.
like anywhere in the US that you need to go. Even it's like if you want to go to like South America, it's not
It's way
that
closer.
difficult. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, surprisingly closer than like Los Angeles, that's for sure. Like there's a lot of Peru flights that go through Texas. Costa
Yeah.
Rica is a little closer.
So should
We'll
we talk
see, but
about mushrooms?
yes, twist my arm. Twist my arm. When did mushrooms come into your life?
Recently, last couple of years.
Mm,
I imagine you hear this or you've heard this before. It was definitely not a part of my life for so long. It wasn't even something I thought of because I went to school and, they taught about drugs are bad.
mm,
And actually, I had this whole like belief system around people who used drugs. And like, I thought it was like the worst thing you can do. I remember in college, I had this friend who said that he did acid. It was like he was just talking about this, like his acid experience, his LSD trip, and like I was so blind at the time. He was speaking about how amazing it was and how transformative it was. And I called him an idiot. I was like, why are you so stupid for doing that? I was like so ignorant
mm.
because of this programming, that I had. Um, and then I, for the very first time, well, not the first time, but like the first time I just sought it out and wanted it, the very first time I like started smoking weed, I was like 27.
Okay.
And I had a business partner at the time who was like 40 I think he was 40 at the time. And he handed me this pen, like this oil pen. And I was like, why not? I'm here, whatever. And I was like, can I keep this? After that. And yeah, like he let me keep it. He's like, yeah, why not? I got another one. And I legit used it every day for like 30 days. I was like, I'm
Wow.
just gonna do an experiment. I'm gonna like hit this pen every day. Which
Mhm.
um looking back, I'm like, all right, that was fun. It was definitely a fun experience. But I was like so lazy, sleepy, and all that. But it so opened my mind up because I remember having this vivid thought, like literally everything I ever thought about this was a lie. Like every judgment I
Powerful.
passed, every single judgment I passed about other people, everything my mom said about weed, everything like those commercials on TV said about it, I was like, it was a lie. And I remember smoking once when I was like 15, and it was super fun. I just never did it again. Um, but I had this like realization, um, and then it just naturally became a part of my life. Like I had this sort of rule where I wouldn't like go and seek it out. Only if it was given to me, I would use it, and that's been pretty fun. Um, Turns out it gets offered to me a lot, so if you, especially in like jujitsu, like everyone smokes weed. I train jujitsu a lot, but
Hmm.
that's another story. Um, I've learned like my limits. I've definitely found ways with like overusing it. But that sort of opened the doors for me. They talk about it like a gateway drug. It totally is. It opened the doors for me to realize that, there are things about this world that are not true. And, the only way to find out, the only way to really know is to go and test things for yourself. Um, anyway, fast forward, I had a friend who gave me weed once, and I asked him, like, you ever get mushrooms? You ever do that? And he's like, yeah, actually I got some right now. You want some? And I bought like 10 grams from him. I gave him like $100.
Nice.
And then they sat in my nightstand for a year. I never used them. Because I was like, I didn't know what was going to happen. I was so I was afraid. Because I had never done it before.
Mm.
I was nervous. I was like, do I need someone with me? I didn't know. Um, about a year and a half ago, I had the opportunity to go to Austin for this coaching summit. I was in this mentorship program, and there were like 100 other people there in this little part of Zilker Park. It was like a camp basically for adults, and everyone there was like in this community, this sort of coaching slash spiritual community, and I was totally open minded to anything, and I got to do like a pretty big dose. I have no idea how much because we didn't measure it. I just grabbed it out of a bag, and that was it. That combined with like breath work and
Mm.
um, what a cool experience. What an
Sounds
interesting
like it.
experience that was. And you know what it was like? I was so excited to do that because of the people that I was around. Like I just had so much trust for the people that I was around, or with the people I was around. And I just knew there was like a part of me that knew I was going to be perfectly safe and that this was going to be a really important moment in my life. And it totally was, because it facilitated a lot of big decisions that I needed to make, and like ultimately changed the course of my life, which was cool, really cool in my opinion. Um, Things that you procrastinate on, things that you overthink, like it gives you a chance to really confront what you want. And I love it for that. I'm really grateful for that opportunity too, and for the the medicine in general.
So wonderful. You had such a beautiful experience with like a group that
Yeah.
could hold you safely. So not just like one container, but one giant
Yeah.
container of many people in a setting
Mm-hmm.
designed to do exactly that, whether it was to hold you specifically for breath work or
Mm-hmm.
throw in some medicine. And I think you really highlighted something that I love about it, which is getting to see things through a different lens, getting to
Yeah.
turn down your default mode network, getting to turn down the thoughts in your head as you usually know them, and instead allowing for the intelligence of this medicine and the connection that it provides to source, to the universe, to open up almost like a different way of looking at your life,
Yeah.
a way that's usually has undertones of love, of unconditional love to them. I find they
Yeah.
sort of program me and push me where if I love more, if I wasn't in so much pain, if I wasn't acting out of fear, if I wasn't acting out of anger, if I was instead acting out of love, what are the decisions I would make?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a resonance I think many of us are always trying to get back to, that
Mm-hmm.
self love and love
Yeah.
that can extend outward.
I remember that specific experience. There were a few takeaways, and I did on the plane home a ton of journaling about it. And t- two words were present for me the whole time. really that whole trip. Like we were there for 5 days, and that was the last day, and uh,
Mm.
and I flew home the next day. But it was two words like just stood out to me as like something to integrate into my identity, and those two words were love and
Mm.
surrender. Um, I was always the type of person before that, not always, but I tended to be. It happened a lot. I was the type of person who would hold on to their beliefs and, you know, argue, fight with people just to defend certain things, like my way, my point of view. It made for a really difficult time as a business owner with partners who had different points of view, because it was like it's either my way or we're not doing anything. Um, and so those two words, like surrender, let go, and then love, and the way that love like just showed up for me is like I can love everyone. I can be this like vibrant energy that we can call love for other people. In fact, that's like the role that I play. Like that's a part of who I am, is to just be and like be that and sort of hold that space. And was really it was really delightful to have that as the as the sort of takeaways. And then one other thing, because we were doing this like 3 hour long breath work slash yoga experience, and it was super intense. And I was at one point I got up and I was like, I do not want to be in this room anymore. And I left. I walked out of the room because I was having my own experience. and
Mm.
um, and then fortunately there were some other people who thought the same thing. You know, we're outside, it's beautiful outside, it's like spring in Austin, it's like 60, 70 degrees and cool and just like so comfortable. And I'm just talking to people. And so most of my life I've had this weird thing where I could be in a conversation and then I feel really awkward leaving. Like if we're in a group of people talking, um and I'm like not saying anything, I get I would get uncomfortable, and I'm like, I don't want to be in this discomfort anymore.
Mm.
Um, so I remember being in a conversation with like four other people during this trip, and I had this phrase repeating in my mind, and it was follow your questions, or let your questions be your guide. That was the phrase that was repeating in my mind. And the moment I legitimately felt like a pull, like some energy in my shoulders or my neck, like pulling me in a direction. And I'm in the middle of a conversation, like mid sentence, and I'm like, I'm gonna go over there now. See you guys later. And I just walked away because I had a question. I was like, I wonder what's over there. And I'm like, I'm such a curious human being. And I used to not allow myself to follow my curiosities, and not leave situations, or you know, I'd think I need to stay in a certain place because it's like, you know, socially acceptable. I don't know. But I just totally let go of that, and I'm just like bouncing around and being really social and talking to people, and allowing myself to just go where my intuition is taking me. Um,
Mm.
and so I've sort of taken that to heart, like, you know, let my questions guide me, because they tend to like give me insight and new information and give me opportunity that I wouldn't otherwise have staying in one place or doing the same thing or ignoring my curiosity. And yeah, what an interesting experience. And like I didn't even plan that. Since then, by the way, I haven't done it again. I've only
Really?
I've only done like micro doses. At most, um, like like I know that you gave me those little capsules.
Hmm.
At most, I've had like 5 of those. Well, I was using. I
Okay.
have another one. Like another friend of mine makes them, and So I have a bottle of those, and I took like 5 of them once, but it's still not like
Yeah, that's still
um,
like half a
not
gram.
enough. Yeah, and that was cool too, but it was more like physical, like more of a feelings thing, not so much of a visual thing. So I
Hmm.
haven't had an experience like that since, and I'm actually really curious to see what it would be like again now, given the integration I've done personally, just all the work I've done for myself, and like
Hmm.
where I'm at now. Super curious.
Mm, I would be curious as well. I certainly have a vision in my head of what I think it might look like for you.
Yeah. What
But
what is that? What is it? What do you think it would be? It would look like?
I think if you did one soon, it would really open your heart up to more visions of what Oregon's going to hold
Hmm.
for you, as well as a, a divine knowing and confidence in the surrender of that path. Um, I don't know if you're going through anything with your actually like with your business right now, but those sort of questions still seem to get ironed out in the medicine of like really what to do, which direction to go in, where to listen harder, where to put more energy. I mean, I would say maybe you're due if it sounds like it's been calling to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. What size dose do you think you'd take?
I mean, I'm for anything. So what would give me the most useful experience?
Hmm. Somewhere in
Um,
like the 2.5 to 3
yeah,
grams.
that's where my mind would go. I don't really think I need the ego death people talk about. Maybe I do. I don't know.
Mm.
Um, Funny, I did this. I led this adventure, this little adventure experience. We do week long ones and we do weekend ones. So I did this weekend one back in April, and it was here in New York, like upstate New York, and some of the people there, I gave them the opportunity to do like a microdose while we're out on a hike, which was super cool because it was pouring rain the whole time.
Oh, wow.
Like just the worst possible weather you could imagine.
Mm.
And like I said earlier, I keep mystery in these experiences, so I didn't tell people how long the hike would be. They only knew what we were going toward, which was like this waterfall, like this beautiful waterfall, which turned out because of the rain to be even better than I expected. Um, but one of the guys, he took a little more than a microdose,
Oh boy.
and we get like it was 7 miles total. We hiked for like 4 hours in the rain. But
Mm.
we get to the waterfall, which is the halfway point, and then we just turned around, came back, and we're there, and we're at the top of the waterfall. It's not very. It's like maybe 60, 70 feet high, pretty big. I wouldn't want anyone to fall off that cliff.
Sure.
And this one guy decides it's a great idea to strip naked and go swimming in the stream that filled up above, where right before the cliff's edge.
Oh.
And so I'm like the guy who's like facilitating this and responsible for everybody, and they paid money for this, so I'm like, I want them to have their experiences, but I need to keep them safe. So I'm like, all right, you can go in, but I'm going in with you, and I'm just standing right next to
Mm.
you. Man, so like he's like stripped down to his underwear, and he turned out to be fine, but everyone
Hmm.
else was like freaking out, like thinking he's gonna die.
But he would just get like washed over the
Oh my
waterfall.
God. Yeah. They're like, no, don't do it. Don't jump. You're gonna. They just thought he was gonna jump. It was hilarious. And this guy is just—he's just such a funny human being. I love him to death. And I knew he was safe because he's not stupid. He's done this, like, done mushrooms before.
Hmm.
But I just want to keep him safe. Anyway, like we finish this whole thing. It's still raining. Where he gets out of the water, and he's like, "All right, why did you let me do that?"
Oh, now it's your fault.
Like, all right, whatever. Dude, you ever watch someone try to put clothes on while they're soaking wet? It's so funny. Yeah, and then we like, and that's when like most like everyone like that's when that was like the peak, and when the like things started to happen, like they started to feel things from the microdose, and the
Hmm.
trees are like all melting, and it's fucking weird and fun. What an
Hmm. Trees
experience.
melting from a microdose. That's a huge
Yeah,
micro.
that's what they said. I don't know. It could have been a combination of the rain and their perception,
Yeah.
and people tend to exaggerate everything.
I
uh,
was talking to a friend earlier this morning too, and he was telling me
yeah,
his son has been taking microdoses for his seizures. His son, who's
cool.
like 16 years old,
Yeah.
but he's been taking them really intentionally and like only like twice a month.
Huh.
And he said that when he takes the micro, he feels like the colors get more vibrant and his heart gets more open. And I was kind of
Yeah.
like, hey, man, how big of a micro is your son taking? Because, like,
Hmm.
it really is meant to be pretty sub-perceptual as a defined microdose. If
Yeah.
you are feeling walls beginning to melt and seeing trees kind of melting, it might not be a micro. And
Yeah.
not that it's a full dose either, but it might be 500 milligrams instead of
Hmm.
100 to 200. Like,
Right. So, well, the dose that I had, it was these chocolates. So
they're just super unpredictable.
I cut them I cut them into quarters, and it said that each one was 1.5 grams of. Oh, so it was definitely more. It was Each one was 1.5 grams of penis envy, and
Each chocolate
so
bar.
yeah, and so I cut them into quarters, and each person got a quarter.
Okay, yeah.
So it
You're
could
giving
be.
people like almost 400 milligrams
Yeah.
a piece.
And for anyone listening, like, this is not a typical thing that we do on these experiences. Like, I'll open the opportunity, um, but it warranted it, and it was fun. You know, the
That sounds
typical
great.
experience is like no one's jumping into anything on top of a waterfall naked. We definitely though. Here's a fun thing. We went to Colorado last year, and we hiked up to this waterfall in Colorado, and I was like, why don't we go stand under it?
Mm.
Let's go do our little cold immersion in a waterfall at 12,000 feet elevation. That'll be awesome. That's a new experience. So we did that, and that was amazing. Like, it was a gentle waterfall over these rocks, and we just sort of laid back and let the water freezing. Jeez,
Mm,
just thinking about it. So we
I
do cool
bet.
stuff like that.
Oh, it sounds so rad.
Yeah,
Yeah, it definitely reminds me that I've done a lot of cool shit in my life, like a lot. There's
I
no
bet.
shortage of unique experiences, but one of the top three coolest things I've ever done, and I am not a hiker. I don't really enjoy hiking past like 2 hours.
Yeah.
One of the coolest things I've ever done was in Waimea Valley on Kauai. My best friend Lexi took me on a 12-mile hike that
Oh.
went down into the valley and then crossed this river like 12 or 13 times. And we ended
Mm,
up at another spot. We had to have a car at the top and a car at the bottom and then drive back to get
mm,
the other car. But it took 8 hours without phone reception. And
mm.
it was the coolest, top three coolest things I've ever done in my entire life.
Yeah.
And how many times I had those moments of like, hey, how much longer? Like, hey, Are we halfway there? Are we a third of the way there? How much more do I need to brace myself for, you
Hmm.
know, as a non-hiker?
Yeah.
And those realizations and those discoveries within myself were beautiful. Like, especially being
Hmm.
so forced into the present moment. Like, no phone reception. It was just the three of us hiking, and we didn't run into a single other person the entire time.
Wow. What a gift.
What a gift. I'd do it
Yeah.
all over again in a heartbeat.
Good. I'd love to have you. I think you'd enjoy it if you came on one of these
Mm.
experiences.
So they're
Um,
all kind of at elevation.
no,
No.
um, they, I like them to include something just difficult. Like climbing a big mountain is a difficult undertaking. So there's like a peak experience, peak physical experience. Um, but no, I wanted, we have one in Colorado again in October. I'm going to do a winter one as well. Still undecided on exactly where. Um,
Mm.
I'm imagining that one will be in like in South America or Mexico.
Cool.
Yeah, and then um, next year I want to do one in Joshua Tree National Park. That will be really cool, and that'll involve some rock climbing. So
Cool.
hiking, rock climbing. Again, it's totally selfish, Barrett, because I'm just picking places that I really want to go and do cool things that I would love to do, and then
Hmm.
do them with people that I want to spend time with, who I know don't get to do this stuff often, if at all. They want to do things like this, like they're open to it. They're like seeking challenges. They're open to seeking and challenging their edge and challenging themselves, like mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And it's such a rewarding experience to get to go and do these. Um, so yeah, the next one's going to be in Colorado, mid October, the 12th or the 14th, that weekend, like a Wednesday to a Sunday.
Cool.
We go. Yeah, and then January would be the next one, and
Okay.
yeah, I'm I like to have the like these like the only the information you need like 2 to 3 months out, and so we keep things like relatively close. I find that's like an easier way to plan these and maintain some mystery and get people hyped up and um, build on the experience too. It's all part of the experience.
I love it. I love the mystery aspect of it, just so people really have to surrender, get out of
Totally.
your comfort zone, let go of control.
Yeah, that
Powerful.
from a business perspective, that means these are super hard to like market on social media. Because I can't really tell people. I give people hints, um, like hints about the region we're going to be in. Like this is what you can expect weather-wise this time of year. This is the type of terrain, things like that. So that
Mhm.
makes it fun. But it takes a very special person to say yes to the unknown. So
Mhm.
if you know anyone who's like so open to just rolling with anything, like they're cool with being spontaneous, or they're not cool with it and they're willing to do it. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of people, there's a lot of type A people who want all of the information. They need to know everything. Um,
Hmm.
and then they do mushrooms and they're like, all right, I need to let go. Like those are my
Exactly.
people.
Well, it's quite likely a lot of them listening, so
I
this
bet.
will come out before October. If anyone is interested in joining you on that one, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Cool. Yeah. I mean, Instagram is just chat with me. To check out, learn more about these experiences. There is a website, mysummit.academy/LV8, pronounced elevate. But that's the sort of portal to enter into this world and see what these are about, read some
Great.
stories and see if it lands with you. I do interview people before these to make sure that it's the right fit. I'm really particular about who I spend time with, particularly because they have to spend time with me, and
Mm,
there's got to be some sort of reason why something like this makes sense, and then a connection like that we can share. Um, Plus, letting people into a group that's going to supposed to build trust is really important.
mhm.
Like having the right people. So there's an application process for these. So if anyone's interested in that, like just hit me up, chat about it, talk about this stuff all day.
Yeah, we'll have that linked up in the show notes
Yeah,
for
thank
ease.
you.
People can learn more about it as well as your Instagram. And this has been such a joy talking to you today, Matt, getting to learn more about you and share in this crazy adventure that we're both on.
Thanks for
Mm.
having me. I appreciate you and getting to talk, getting to share. It's always fun.
Yes. Well, thank you so much.